Now, you might be thinking to yourself, well, how are you going to prove this one? I'm not. You are. How do you know if something is true? How do you know if something is real? One of the ways to know it is just to perceive it. It's just to have a first-person, personal perception of the thing in question, to be able to see it. Think about this, the Rwandan genocide, which is over 20 years old at this point. In the Rwandan genocide, the Hutu majority killed 800,000 Tutsi in 100 days, a period of 3 months. That was more deaths per day for 3 months than in any 3 months of the Holocaust. 6 people per minute for 3 months, or to put that in perspective, about half of the people in this room. And they did it with machete. They hacked people down with machete, the Rwandan genocide. Now, let me ask you a question. Your direct, first-person, personal intuition and perception, how do you view this? Do you view this as Richard Dawkins does, that eventually we will grow out of all of this and we will learn to laugh at it? Do you believe that you'll eventually reach a state of enlightenment where you could look at 800,000 Tutsi killed by machete and believe that that's enlightenment? Now you might say, well, not everyone believes that. I'm not asking about everyone. I'm asking about you. What is your perception of that? What would you call that? Here's baby Riley. He was discovered, he's an 8-month-old baby. He was discovered in an apartment complex as his parents were throwing a rager party, and over the loud booming music and the drug smoke coming through this apartment, some of their friends found that baby Riley was screaming from the bedroom. They came in to find an 8-month-old emaciated baby. The parents went on record to say that they were, quote, too lazy and too busy to feed him. What is your perception of that? Well, not everyone would agree with that. I'm not asking about everyone. I'm asking about you. What is your first-person, direct perception of that? 2014, Indian police, as well as a gang of men, raped and hanged 2 Indian women, 14 and 15 years old. You know what the community did? They were so outraged at this that they said, we will not cut those women down until we have justice. What is your perception of that? What would you tell those families? Well, it's just subjective. I mean, I wouldn't do that to your daughters. I don't think that that's right, but I mean, who am I to say? Who am I to judge? What about Emmett Till? You know Emmett Till? Emmett Till one day was a young teenage black youth who walked into a drugstore and apparently had catcalled at a white woman. Well, several of the white men in the rural South came to his house at gunpoint, grabbed Emmett Till, tortured him, beat him, and killed him, and threw his body into a river. The all-white jury let those 2 men off. The mother eventually found the body of her son, and they said, Mamie, which was her name, we need to have a closed casket. And she said, no, I'm going to have an open casket. And they asked her why, and she said, let the people see what I've seen. If the white majority in the 1950s could just see with their own eyes, if they could just perceive the cruelty, the marginalization, the torture, the racism, if they could just see it, they could know it. Well, for 1950, this photo went viral. It went all over the country, and this was really responsible for the modern civil rights movement. And what did it come from? From seeing evil itself. We could compare this with sensory perception. What if somebody said, well, I just don't believe that we can see things around us. They call this solipsism, that we're just a brain in a vat, or maybe you're plugged into the Matrix, or Descartes, we're being deceived by demons, or maybe you're just like some kind of a brain and nothing's really out there. How would you argue against a person like that? I mean, one way it would be to say, I'm here, I'm touching you, I'm real. Yeah, but that could just be my brain tricking me. I mean, science. Yeah, but that could be my brain tricking me that we're looking at these scientific findings. I mean, somebody who's arguing against sensory perception, you would say, give me a break. Come on, pal. I mean, but what if somebody was arguing against moral perception? You might say, well, are you 100% certain that there's an external world, that the universe wasn't created 5 minutes ago with the appearance of age and built-in memories? I'm not 100% certain. No, I'm not. But I'm really, really, really certain. What about moral values and duties? Are you 100% certain that torturing babies for fun is wrong? I actually might be more certain of that than I am of the sensory perception, actually. Years ago, somebody came out with the report. They said, Pluto is no longer a planet. You know what I did? I was like, what's for breakfast? It didn't bother me one bit. Now, what if the news headline said, torturing babies for fun is not immoral? You could argue that you can actually know scientific knowledge less certainly than moral knowledge. What about color blindness? Think about sensory perception or optical illusions. What number is up there? 15? Oh, 4.5% of you didn't know. And you just, I can tell you are because you just put your chin to your chest in shame. So let's say there's 1,000 people in this room and 45 of us can't perceive that number. Should the other 955 of us say that that number isn't up there? When it comes to perceiving morality, just because one person says, well, I don't agree with that, does that mean that the rest of us, it's incumbent upon us to say, well, I guess one person disagrees? Actually, for some moral values, like torturing babies for fun, it wouldn't be 4.5% disagree. It'd probably be 0.000001% disagree, that we can perceive it. It's actually quite clear. And it's very hard to deny in practice. Remember Peter Singer? Remember his thesis was a utilitarian thesis that the majority of the value, what do you call it, talk, the pleasure of the most amount of people outweighs the pleasure of the few, utilitarianism. And so his definition of human personhood was that you have to be sentient, you have to be rational, and so forth, right? So he argues that actually infants can be killed. He argues that people who reach senility, they've lost sentience and they've lost rationality, they could be killed. Guess what happened to Peter Singer? His mother came down with Alzheimer's. You know what he did to her? He went up into her bedroom late at night and with a pillow smushed it over her face. And, I'm kidding, he didn't do that. Make that up. I saw one of your faces, you're like, ugh. This is so macabre. Why did I come tonight? Okay, no, he didn't do that. You know what he did? He spent tens of thousands of dollars to take care of her. In the New Yorker in 1999, Michael Spector hit him with this inconsistency. He says, how about that? And Peter Singer said, I think that this has made me see how the issues of someone with these kinds of difficulties and problems are really very difficult. Perhaps it is more difficult than I thought before, because it is different when it's your mother. How about that? Now you might be saying, I'm putting that up there to make Peter Singer look like a hypocrite. I'm not. I'm saying that this man who has studied bioethics for half a century in the academy, when he put that against his moral perception of killing his own mother, which thing won? His moral perception. He could see, I can't kill her. I agree with this philosopher here who said an ethical judgment that is no good in practice must suffer from a theoretical defect. If you can't live this out in practice, there must be something wrong with your theory. Who said that, by the way? Peter Singer said that. So now he's calling himself a hypocrite, so I don't have to. If morality is subjective, I have a few questions. Why does this change when we are the victims? Isn't that interesting? I really believe morality is subjective when I'm going out and stealing from other people. But when somebody steals from me, it becomes abundantly clear that was wrong. When somebody rips me off sexually, that's wrong. If I rip somebody else off sexually, well, sexuality, it's just, it's relative. Why is it that when we're the victims, it becomes abundantly clear that this is real? Why are we torn over moral dilemmas? Like when people say we're in these moral dilemmas, should I steal it? Should I not? Should I tell the truth? Should I stay safe? I don't know. Okay, that's like asking if morality is subjective, that the dilemma is like, should I have the Reese's Cocoa Puffs or the Cheerios? It's just a matter of taste. Why are we torn? There'd be nothing to be torn over. Why is it that naturalists are always arguing about the problem of evil? In order for there to be evil, there needs to be good. But in order to have good and evil, you need some kind of a moral law to differentiate and adjudicate between the two. But in order to have a moral law, you need to have a moral lawgiver. But that's the very thing that they're trying to disprove, not to prove. Evil is a moral value, and moral values lead you to the logos, the source of moral value, which is God. If somebody was saying, well, I don't mean that evil's like really objectively wrong, I'm just saying it's subjectively wrong, then really what you're saying is the problem of evil is like the problem of broccoli. How do you know God doesn't exist? Broccoli. What do you mean? I really don't like it. It's very distasteful to me. Well, that's just not going to suffice. That's your personal, but we all know what you mean. When you say that, how could God allow so much evil? And there's good answers for that. That's just not our subject tonight. How could God allow so much evil? We know what you mean. You mean in the objective sense. But how can you hold that view at the same time holding that morality is subjective? Finally, why is it that the new atheists have made millions of dollars indicting the God of the Bible for immoral acts? Richard Dawkins says that the God of the Old Testament is the most bloodthirsty, masochistic, evil, malevolent person in all of fiction. That's what he says. How can you know that those things are immoral if you don't believe in immorality? Richard Dawkins was famous for saying that there is at bottom no evil, no good, no purpose, just blind, pitiless indifference. He says that in one book, and then in another book, he spends 400 pages excoriating the immoral, evil acts in the Bible. So which is it? Which is it? Years ago, I was talking to a young agnostic student, and we were having a really good conversation. He's a real sweetheart of a guy, and we're going back and forth. And at one point, he said, I just don't believe that morality is objective. I believe it's subjective. I said, huh. But then he went on to talk about all these problems he had with the Bible. One of the problems he brought up, I'll never forget, was in 2 Kings chapter 2, where the prophet Elisha was walking through one of the cities in Israel, and these 42 youths come up to Elisha, the prophet. And they go up to him and they say, get out of here, Baldy. Go on up, go on up. And Elisha calls down a prayer from God, and 2 female bears come out of the woods and maul these 42 boys. So he hits me with this question, and he says, yeah, what about that? And I actually had plenty to say to him. Actually, the word for youth in Hebrew is more like a teenager. There's 42 of them. There's one prophet. They weren't just calling him Baldy in the sense they're making fun of him for being bald. To say that he has to go up was like go up like Elijah earlier in the chapter. We want you dead. We want you out of here. This was a youth gang coming in on the... Okay, I didn't go there, though, okay? I've got plenty to say about that. I didn't go there. I said, wait a minute. You just told me that morality is subjective, not objective. He said, yeah, that's right. I said, then I have a question. What's wrong with bears eating boys? They were probably really hungry. It would have been equivalent to like a nice veal steak, these young boys. In naturalism, what's wrong with bears eating boys? And he said, well, it's wrong because you believe that God is loving and God is good. And so why would he do that? And I said, now, wait a minute. Let's pause for a second. Do you realize what you just said? You couldn't say that that was immoral, bears eating boys. What you had to do was erect my worldview. You had to erect a God you don't believe in to be able to call that wrong, and then argue against